Hello, everybody. I'm Brian Herbert. I'm the director of Crowdmap. And Crowdmap is a service that allows you to set up your own map and timeline and essentially crowdsource geospatial and temporal information from a variety of sources. This is built on top of the free and open source platform Ushahidi, which has been used in the past to gather reports in Kenya during post-election violence in 2008, and as recent as a year ago for Haiti during the earthquake, where we accepted over 45,000 SMS messages directly from citizens on the ground asking for help in one way or another. So Crowdmap allows you to get a basic version of these types of maps in only a few minutes. We do this by giving you your own subdomain and hosting it on our servers. So how do you collect information after you set up your deployment? Well, we developed our service with the default device in mind, and this is essentially SMS. Since our roots are in Africa and everybody has SMS, we wanted to make sure that our service could work for them. So since then, we also developed iPhone applications, Android applications, J2ME, working on a BlackBerry application to attach more rich media to our reports. So where have we been used before? The BBC used us last year to track the tube strikes in London. The Chicago Tribune used us to collect reports surrounding the blizzard in February. ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, used us for the Queensland floods. And it doesn't have to all be doom and gloom. The Guardian used us to track incidents of miracles while the Pope was traveling through the UK. So we continue to look forward to seeing new innovative uses for Crowdmap, and thank you very much.
And so one thing I failed to mention is the format of this event. So each of the presenting companies will have 2 minutes to present their company and their business model, followed by 10 minutes of Q&A from the judges and myself. So with that, we will kick off the 10-minute Q&A.
Brian, when you get SMS, how do you wind up geolocating those?
So that's actually a difficult problem. When we ask people to submit information, we tell them to include their location. And if they don't include the location, inside the administrative panel of the software, you can actually immediately send them a request to ask them to tell you where they are. In the case of Haiti, they were submitting information in Haitian Creole, and a lot of times they'll mention, you know, I'm in a building that's across the street from this place where so-and-so was 2 years ago, because that's the way that they give directions. But we had about 100 or so volunteers from the Haitian diaspora who were able to translate those messages and find where those locations were. And then those messages were then passed on to the US Coast Guard and the State Department to do search and rescue.
Brian, is it mostly pushing information out to news sources so that others can see in, or is there a way of connecting users between, you know, on the ground, someone's across the street from another, and they can come together?
Yeah, so that's possible by drilling down into the individual report. You can leave comments. You can do like a dig style up or down on what you think about that.
But the person would have to be consuming that from a browser, or let's say I text in and you're across the street and you text in. Is there something that can connect us and say, hey, we're both here, and off we go? Or
yeah, you can also sign up for alerts. And alerts, it's basically an area where you click on the map and you say, I want to get everything within a 20-kilometer radius of here.
Gotcha.
And you can get that via SMS or RSS feed, email, any way that you are most comfortable digesting that information.
Mm-hmm.
So as a newsroom manager, and I used to be at The Guardian, where I believe that the actual instance of miracles was none, but nice
there were a few miracles. I like to say that it was tracking miracles because it's kind of funny. There are some funny ones on there. But it was people submitting reports about how they felt about the Pope coming.
Indeed. Yeah. Do you keep, or can you tell me as somebody who's a client, what will that actually do for engagement? Do you have any metrics in terms of how effective your maps are, or what the traffic is like, what the dwell time's like?
Sure. So the maps that generate the most traffic are the ones that deal with natural disasters or crisis situations, because people are desperate for help, and they're willing to submit information to any place they possibly can to get that help. In the case of the Pope coming, it really depends on the program, not the technology. Because the technology is such a small component. Like we like to say that Ushahidi is only 10% of the solution. And with Crowdmap, it's like almost 0 or 1%, because you don't even need to know how to install something on a web server. So It's really more about the program, how you market your project.
And a lot of newsrooms will be hearing about things like Google Fusion Maps at the moment and how easy they are, et cetera. What advantages would you give to a non-technically savvy news editor about why they should use Crowdmap instead of the other things that are available?
So what we do is we're set up to accept SMS messages from smartphones, which you can't just do on Google Maps. You can't just create a Google Map and expect somebody to submit a text message to a phone number and get that up on the map. So we try to simplify that process and make that easier.
Who do you see as the primary audience for the self-service? I mean, do you see newsrooms as the primary audience, or just individuals using it, signing up?
Well, we've seen newsrooms using it quite a bit to generate leads on stories like the Chicago Tribune. Got a few stories out of collecting reports from what people were seeing during the blizzard. But there's also another deployment called the Burger Map, so people are crowdsourcing the best cheeseburgers in America. So, I mean, you can really use it for anything that has to do with, as I said, geospatial temporal, and we really want to see people using this for things that we had never thought of before. So I think we like to step back, and we like to talk about disaster and crisis, but we want to see what people can come up with that we would never even imagine.
Can you give us some sense of how many maps have been created or being created at the moment?
There have been over 10,000 installs of Ushahidi and Crowdmap together, and Crowdmap alone has been over 6,200 maps set up.
How easy is the integrations in terms of if, can anybody do it, or?
Anybody. So the most difficult component technically is actually setting up the SMS to get that to pipe into your deployment. Something in the future that we want to do is make SMS more of a turnkey situation, and that's one of the ways that we're going to look at monetizing the platform is adding a small margin to the SMS messages. But right now there are 3 ways that you can pipe in messages, and that's either through our Android application called SMS Sync, and what that does is that forwards every message that your Android device gets to your deployment. We also integrate with Frontline SMS, which allows you to plug in virtually any cell phone, and then it forwards messages to the deployment. Or you can hook into a global SMS gateway like Clickatel and just pay them and then put in your API key, and then you're off to the races. You're good to go, yeah.
And the different monetization angles, mostly clients and services, or are there other?
Well, for the Guardian's case, they didn't pay us anything because they're just using Crowdmap. BBC was just using Crowdmap. We do offer some VIP services, so higher paying clients can get customization from us. We're looking at adding value-added services to Crowdmap, like using your own domain, because currently you can only use a subdomain, simplifying the SMS process and things of that nature.
Sorry, it's a very obvious question, but who then owns the IP on the actual content of the maps?
We give that to the deployers.
Right.
So the people who run their own deployments. In the case of Ushahidi, you run it on your own server. We might not even know about it. So.
You want to talk a little bit more about your team? Yourself, your background, and the rest of the guys who launched it?
So, so our team is about 12 or 13 people. We're spread over 7 time zones. We're totally virtual. We have a group of people in Nairobi at a place called the iHub. It's a tech innovation center that we started, which is just now a year old and has over 3,000 members. And essentially, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Kenya. We all have some kind of connection to Kenya. And when I left Kenya, the election violence happened right after I left, so I was actually a user of the system to take those reports and then pass them back on to my colleagues who are on the ground. And then it quickly became an open source project and volunteered, and then we are talking about it. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Can you talk a bit about what your current business plan is? How would you expect to scale the business in the next 2 or 3 years?
So as I said before, we're doing these one-off customizations for organizations like the United Nations or World Bank, which those are pretty high profit services that we can offer. And then we can allow people to make things easier with their own domain or SMS. That's pretty much what we're talking about right now. We're still coming up with the best monetization strategy because we are a nonprofit, and we want to make sure that we stay true to those roots, and we don't want to look like we're just trying to collect money from people, especially in sensitive situations like disasters or any type of disaster.
So a lot of this is happening now just via geolocation on Twitter, and you guys are focusing on SMS. Is that that's purposeful, obviously. Are you just going to stay specifically on SMS and capture that kind of broader area of the market where SMS is ubiquitous, or are you going to bring in, I mean, you say you bring in Twitter as well, but how do you compete essentially? I mean, we're seeing the different Twitter maps of, revolutions happening over the place. Kind of, why would I use this as opposed to, something like a Twitter map?
So Ushahidi, the organization, has another product called Swift River, which it's a way of using natural language processing and machine learning to figure out which messages that you want to pull in. And Crowdmap, we're designing it so Crowdmap can work seamlessly with these tools. And basically, you would want to use our software because you could easily plug into something that'll make it easier to sort through the noise. So, during a disaster, there might be, like, imagine if an earthquake hit Austin, like, right now. How many Twitter messages would there be to sift through as an administrator of a deployment to find out what's important? We have tools that'll help with that.
So I have a follow-up to that. So can you guys automate the updates through the Twitter feeds themselves, or does it have to have the hashtag included in it?
You can search a hashtag or a search query or whatever. But most of the reports, because we do have our roots in man-made disaster, like the post-election violence in Kenya, have to be approved by an administrator. Through the use of our plugin architecture and our theming platform, you can easily write a plugin to auto-approve reports or determine where a particular piece of information might belong. Which is another thing we're working on with Swift River, is taking an SMS message that might have a piece of geodata in it, like a street corner, where it would automatically take that SMS message and map it. Because not all Twitter messages have reliable lat-long coordinates.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, great.